Welcome to part 2 of our lecture on industrialization, immigration, urbanization areas. So we finished up with talking about the immigrants. Now we have to talk about where did they move, why did they move to the cities, and then some of the other factors in the cities. So here we've got some examples of the era and some of the conditions of urbanization, the growth of these cities, population booming coming from Slavic Europe, Southern Europe, Asia, and we see that these conditions are just horrific. These are obviously not the greatest pictures, but it can demonstrate to you all of the issues and the problems that they faced. So we see what would have been really difficult conditions to live in, filthy, nasty, terrible places. We see once again this idea of Americanization or assimilation, making them as similar to us as they can be. We see this process being put on to the schools to educate them, and then especially volunteer organizations. One of the factors that we see is that immigrants do not want to abandon their old ways. This is common through till today. This is something that makes sense. You don't want to give up everything that is you. And so one of the things that they do they would form these protective neighborhoods, or enclaves is the technical term for that. And this is areas of the cities where large populations of these groups would form, and that would let them speak their language. It would let them produce food, marketplaces that would have things that are familiar to them. They would be able to have gatherings where they would speak, interact with each other. Their clothing could be similar to their homelands. It would be a necessity for comfort that they would be able to provide for themselves. These exist all over the place. Most commonly, you'll hear some things such as like Little Italy or Chinatowns in large cities. In Columbus, in particular, we have a German village where lots of German people would have settled, and so you've got some food places that are still there to today, and some of the stuff that just kind of holds over from that. One of the volunteer organizations or movements would be a better term to look at is the social gospel movement or the social housekeeping movement. Both of those terms can be used fairly interchangeably. This particular movement is headed by the women of society. We tend to use that housekeeping term sometimes in order to promote the idea that they are cleaning up society and capitalizing on that prototypical woman's role. In U.S. history, we talked to you about the progressive era and some of the goals. We apply this one to the promotion of moral welfare. And so social gospel applies to this idea that we are preaching to the people, we are teaching them a better way of life, and we are trying to assist those that need assistance. In particular, we focus a lot of the work, those involved in social gospel movement, on these immigrants that are coming in. One of the most well-known instances of this and earliest examples is Jane Addams running Chicago's Hull House. Now, to understand this a little bit, we don't have the time for a great in-depth examination here, but just understand this is not a housing kind of issue. They would provide things such as education, job training, writing skills. They would provide medical attention if necessary, but it is not a housing kind of an issue. Think along the lines maybe of a Red Cross type of organization today. Another issue that these people would have faced, these immigrants coming into our country, is trying to learn how to deal with the politics of our country. They're told about all of the freedoms and all of the great things that our country has governmentally, and when they arrive, they discover that some of that is not entirely true. You guys examined and talked about Tammany Hall some with your discussions, and I thought you guys did a good job talking about the corruption and the nature of the political machine. You've got people that are in office and they do not necessarily use the best methods to stay in office. A lot of times you'll see this, especially Tammany Hall, where the controller's not even a publicly elected official. It's somebody above that, but uses their power to control votes, to get people into certain jobs that they know will support them. And then they use graft or bribery or corruption in order to stay there. These political machines control everything about the cities or the regions that they're in control of. When immigrants come in, as it says, they do not have the skills. They don't understand what our life is like in our governmental system, so they get taken advantage of. As we talked about graft, patronage system, you guys talked about in your discussions some, and then talked about the Pendleton Service Act. So this is kind of like the spoils system that we looked at under Jacksonian democracy. Give jobs to those that support you. And again, this is something the immigrants needed jobs. They had to survive. So if someone was going to give you a job, of course you were going to vote for that person. You're going to do whatever you could for them. A response to the assassination of President Garfield is this also the Pendleton Service Act. We say these systems. The biggest thing that this does is that you must pass a skills test. That is much different than just the giving it to someone who supports you in a position of power. There is also a committee that is formed of both parties, and you have to be approved by them in order to get a job. Works to eliminate some of this graft and patronage. I know Rocky Thatcher in particular talked about how donations no longer were forced by their governmental officials on people. That was taken away, but the unfortunate nature of that is that business gets involved and starts making the donations. Growth of cities. We've got a lot of different things that are going on. This is a little bit, I think this picture probably is outside of our era of study, but it's a good example of all of this industrialization and immigration adding up to creating a different kind of cityscape. With the new steel that was developed and some other inventions, innovations, you get to see these skyscrapers, massive buildings stretching all the way to the heavens, it seems like, to these people. And this is a change that is just epic proportions. We cannot describe enough of how much value this has in determining the use of these urban areas. One of the other impacts is that people surrounded and crowded in these massive buildings everywhere, surrounded by nothing but steel and concrete and stone and whatever, they start to develop a need to see some sort of open spaces. And a couple of very famous architects and city planners, Frederick Olmsted and Daniel Burnham, work to do this. And so you see cities that work and try to create some of this green area for people to be able to go and enjoy nature even though they're in a city area. And this is a great picture of New York City on both sides, the Flatiron Building that we saw 2 slides ago on the left, and then New York's Central Park on the right. Again, one of the largest urban park areas that people can go out and enjoy nature. Brief overview, most of what's on here is unnecessary. The highlighted area is important to understand that all of this is adding up to faster, faster, faster. Spread of information, travel, transport of goods. Everything is speeding up. We also have the need to talk about some of the other minority types of groups that are involved in this era, and in particular the African American activists that are taking a large role in leading this country during this time. We see here Booker T. Washington, who I've talked about in class very briefly before. He creates the Tuskegee Institute. His belief is that African Americans are going to prove their value by economic and work skills, laboring. He did not necessarily think that poetry or art or the upper level education kind of things was the way to do it. It was economic value. He also believed that there would be a slow step-by-step process of integration into the American mainstream. Contrasted to Booker T. Washington is W.E.B. Du Bois. He is the leader of the Niagara movement. He believes in what is called the talented 10%. He thinks that if you give the higher education and the higher types of skills and abilities to African Americans or help them achieve those, that they will show that they are quite equal of ability and stature with white Americans. He believed, though, that this needed to be an immediate inclusion and equality into mainstream America in order for them to show this ability to be equals and be treated as equals. So two guys, same kind of goal, fully integrated into American society, full equality of African Americans and white Americans, but different methodology to achieve this. Foundation of a group that works for this. We sometimes talk about special interest groups in regular sophomore U.S. history, and I think that this is something to hit with some of our related thematic objectives that we've got here. Groups that have worked to change America in some way. And so we see here the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, a special interest group who works for a lot of different programs to help fight for equality amongst the races. Education being one of their major movements that they do. They have funded thousands upon thousands of dollars for college scholarships for African American people, and they do a lot of other legal work as well. So, to sum up this section of this is we were having to move into cities. This is where the economic opportunity is. And then when we get to those cities, there are lots of issues that we cover. We didn't specifically talk about particular issues of the cities, but you've got things like diseases, you've got things like fire, like crime, like not enough water, you have not enough good transportation, and the infrastructure of these cities as they expand cannot keep up. So you try to build railroad lines and subway lines and telephone lines in the midst of a city that's already developed, and it is very, very hard for these cities to control all of that. Anywhere you've got lots of crowded people, you're going to have human waste, and that produces a lot of disease, obviously. If you do not have enough water, they don't have it clean to drink out of, that is a promotion of disease. If there are fires in those buildings that you saw in those pictures at the beginning, they don't have the water to fight them. There aren't necessarily organized police departments early in these stages. So we've got a lot of issues that our country has produced. In the first part, we talked a lot about industrialization and the power of those companies. This is producing issues that we're going to have to face as well. We will be looking in our next period of study at something called progressive era, and this is where Americans try to fix what we call the ills, or the things that are making America sick. They focus on business, they focus on political corruption, and they focus on the problems of urbanization. Thank you. I hope that this has been helpful for you. On the attachments in Google Classroom, you will see that this is a very brief version of the slides that are available to you there. So I hope that this has helped you gain some form of understanding on industrialization, immigration, and urbanization.